while all the rest, hundreds and hundreds it seemed, went and sat in a great circle in the glade, and in the middle of the circle was a great gray wolf. He spoke to them in a dreadful language of the wargs. Gandalf understood it. Even now and then all the wargs in the circle would answer their gray chief all together, and their dreadful clamor almost made the hobbit fall out of his pine tree. I will tell you what Gandalf heard, though Bilbo did not understand it. The wargs and their goblins often helped one another in wicked deeds. Goblins did not usually venture far from the mountains unless they are driven out and looking for new homes, or are marching to war, which I am glad to say has not happened for a long while. But in those days, sometimes they used to go on raids, especially to get food or slaves to work for them. Then they had got the wargs to help them and shared the plunder with them. Sometimes they rode on the wolves like men do on horses. Now it seemed that a great goblin raid had been planned for that very night. The wargs had come to meet the goblins, and the goblins were late. The reason, no doubt, was the death of the great goblin, and all the excitement caused by the dwarves and Bilbo and the wizard for who they were probably still hunting. In spite of the dangers of this far land, bold men had of late been making their way back into the south, cutting down trees, and building themselves places to live among the more pleasant woods in the valleys and along the river shores. There were many of them, and they were brave and well armed, and even the wargs dared not attack them if they were many together, or in the bright of day. But now they had planned with the goblins to help come by night upon some of the villages nearest the mountains. If their plan had been carried out, there would have been none left the next day. All would have been killed, except for a few the goblins kept for the wolves and carried back as prisoners to their caves. This was dreadful talk to listen to, not only because the brave woodsmen and their wives and children, but also because of the danger that now threatened Gandalf and his friends. The wargs were angry and puzzled at finding them in this very meeting place. They thought they were friends of the woodsmen, and when they came to spy on them, they would take news of their plans down into the valleys, and then the goblins and the wolves would have to fight a terrible battle instead of capturing prisoners and devouring people wake suddenly from their sleep. So the wargs had no intention of going away and letting the people up in the trees escape, at any rate not until morning. And long before that, they said, goblin soldiers would be coming down from the mountains, and goblins can climb trees and cut them down. Now you can understand why Gandalf, listening to their growling and yelping, began to be dreadfully afraid, wizard or no, and to feel that they were in a very bad place, and they had not yet escaped at all. All the same, he was not going to let them have it their own way, though he could not do very much stuck up in a tall tree, with wolves all around from below. He gathered the huge pine cones from the branches of his tree, and then he set one alight with a bright blue fire, and threw it, whizzing down among the circle of wolves. It struck on the back, and immediately his shaggy coat caught fire, and he was leaping to and fro horribly. And then another came, and another, and another. One in blue flames, one in red, another in green. They burst on the ground in the middle of the circle and went off in colored sparks and smoke. A especially large one hit the chief wolf on the nose, and he leaped in the air 10 feet, and then rushed around the circle, biting and snapping even at the other wolves in his anger and fright. The dwarves and Bilbo shouted and cheered. The rage of the wolves was terrible to see, and the commotion that they made filled all the forest. Wolves were afraid of fire at all times, but this was a most horrible and uncanny fire. If a spark got in their coats, it stuck and burned into them, and unless they rolled over quick, they were soon all in flames. Very soon, all about the glade, wolves were running over and putting sparks out on their backs, while those that were burning were running about and howling and setting others alight, till their own friends chased them away, and they fled down the slopes crying and yammering and looking for water. "What is all this uproar in the forest night?" said the Lord of the Eagles. He was sitting, black in the moonlight, on top of a lonely pinnacle of rock on the eastern edge of the mountains. "I hear wolves' voices. Are the goblins at mischief in the woods?" He swept up into the air, and immediately two of his guards from the rocks at either center leapt up to follow him. They circled up into the sky, looked down upon the edge of the wargs, a tiny spot far below. But eagles have keen eyes and can see small things at a great distance. The Lord of the Eagles of the Misty Mountains had eyes that could look at the sun unblinking, and could see a rabbit moving on the ground a mile below, even in the moonlight. So though he could not see the people in the trees, he could make out the commotion among the wolves, and see the tiny flashes of fire, and hear the howling and yelping coming up faint from far behind. And he could see the glint of the moon on the goblin spears and helmets, as long lines of the wicked folk crept from their hillsides and gave the gate, and from their gate and the wound in their woods. Eagles were not kindly birds. Some are cowardly and cruel. But the ancient race of the northern mountains were the greatest of all birds. They were proud and strong and noble-hearted. They did not love goblins, or fear them, and when they took any notice of them at all, which was seldom, for they did not eat such creatures, they swooped over them and drove them shrieking back to their caves, and stopped at whatever wickedness they were doing. The goblins hated the eagles and feared them, but they could not reach their lofty seats or drive them from the mountains. And if you want to find out what happens with the goblins, tune in next time. Thank you for watching Role Play Riot.